Welcome back, everyone. Psychic Angelo here, along with my esteemed colleague, the guru of professional wrestling, Jeff the Ref Robinson, and our cohort in crime, Mike the Movie Maker Messier. Hey, Mikey, how you doing?
I'm good, guys. Good to be here, Angelo. Good to be here, Jeff the Ref, and looking forward to another great episode with you guys.
All right. Jeff, how are you, my friend? What's happening?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good, man. Not much. Just, got over this long weekend of Survivor Series weekend. It almost reminded me of WrestleMania weekend, except for we didn't have an 8-hour show on Sunday, so.
Fill me in, Jeff. There's mixed reviews, of course, you realize that.
I mean, if you don't, I don't count SmackDown as part of it, even though SmackDown wasn't that bad to lead into it, but the NXT show last Wednesday to lead into the whole thing, I think they went off. That was awesome. Saturday's NXT TakeOver, loved it from top to bottom. I know that Mike had an opinion about it. He wanted the blood. I agree. I understand that. But unfortunately, we deal with corporate wrestling in this world, and we can't have blood when you got corporate dollars that dictate what you do and what you don't do anymore. But I think as far as for the women to have done what they did, it was Rhea Ripley's weekend. I mean, she came out shining. And
yeah, I think everybody universally agrees to that.
I mean, she just they told. I mean, that War Games, just real quick, the women's War Games. I think, and Mike would probably agree with me. They told a great story as far as it being a 4-on-2 encounter, and it looking like the impossible odds. And then here's Rhea Ripley able to finally, make that monster comeback. And that way, whenever she does finally, I mean, I'm assuming it's going to probably be WrestleMania TakeOver weekend. Her and Shayna are going to probably lock horns. And that's going to be gangbusters as far as, the crowd goes.
Jeff, what's the plans for Rhea? I'm hearing a lot of different things about what they're going to do with her.
I mean, I think that they're high on her. I mean, I think that from all indications is that Vince and company are high on Shayna Baszler, and I can see them taking the belt off of her because they want to bring her up to the main roster, give her more time up there, and Rhea Ripley being the new one that they're going to put the shine on.
All right, let's assume that Ronda Rousey comes back.
You got it. You have to. She's under a 3-year deal.
Okay, so she's coming back at some point, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Shayna Baszler and Ronda Rousey have a history.
They've been together as the 4 horsewomen on MMA.
Right, but they also have a history against each other. That's how they became friends.
Yeah, I think ultimately, if Vince had his way in his dream match, it would be the 4 horsewomen of MMA versus the WWE's 4 horsewomen of Charlotte, Sasha, Becky.
Jeff, I might even pay to see that one.
And, I mean, now whether or not they do it tag matches or singles at Mania, I personally think they could go 4-on-4 and really have a good encounter. However, you do tend to lose a lot when you do a 4-on-4 or even a 6-man match. But,
right.
I mean, if they do it right, I think they could do it. I mean, but I think that just overall NXT TakeOver weekend was really good. I mean, to me, they stole the show over Survivor Series. Even though Survivor Series, don't get me wrong, Survivor Series with the added NXT to the mix, the added intrigue, to me it did, as a fan.
It appears by all logical standards that NXT is quickly becoming the go-to show. A lot of people in corporate aren't real happy about that.
Well, I mean, Raw's always been the it brand. I mean, people want to, they want to point to Seth Rollins real quick, his promo that he cut last night. That was more or less reiterating what the internet's been saying about Raw's turned into the C show and no longer even, I mean, it's crazy to even think about that Raw is not important anymore when Monday nights, and I'll go back even before Raw when it was primetime wrestling on USA. It's always been that go-to for the WWF was Monday nights at 9 o'clock.
Of course.
And to think that no longer matters, that's kind of crazy. But
it's not that it doesn't matter, Jeff. It seems to be less important.
Well, it is. I mean, NXT right now is delivering what the fans want to see,
which is young.
Youth. I mean,
youth.
behind the scenes talk with me and you had talked about yesterday really briefly.
Yeah.
Part of the problem, and everybody goes, "Oh, the WWE stale, and SmackDown and Raw are stale." Well, of course it is. This is what happened when WWE bought out WCW. This is the problem. This is the ripple effect. This is whatever you want to call it. You got guys like Randy Orton and various other ones who you have seen inundated on your TV for the last 15, 20 years, and everybody's going, "I'm tired of seeing them." Well, at least back in the day when you had the territories, you got stale. They just shipped you off to Texas or Florida or wherever they needed to ship you to get some more polish and bring you back. That's why the crowd pops whenever you come back from an injury after 9 months. All of a sudden it's like, woo, we haven't seen you in 9 months. Yay. And I think they would do a world of good. I don't know how they could. I really don't. Well, they could actually now with UK and NXT and all that. I mean, it would do them. What would it hurt? And for them to tell the guys, look, I'm giving you 3 months off to heal injuries, and when I bring you back, I'm going to put you on NXT, or I'm going to ship you over to NXT UK.
Well, I think you and Mikey need to book the show.
I think me and Mikey did. We'd be doing.
Mikey, what are your thoughts on this whole Survivor weekend?
I thought it was pretty good. I'd probably agree with Jeff. I think that if a person only watched Survivor Series and did not watch NXT TakeOver with the War Games, they'd probably be missing out. And I think the story of the weekend was and I going into it, I saw the story coming, but I didn't like it, which was, can the NXT people beat each other up, pound each other into oblivion, and then come back strong as a united front on Survivor Series? Going into this, I didn't like that storyline, but I think they did a pretty good job with it once it was all said and done.
Mikey, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Was it a good idea to obliterate Adam Cole one night and leave him a bloody pile of heap in the ring and then bring him back the next night looking like nothing ever happened?
Well, I mean, they had his ribs taped up. I think that was a tip of the hat to the night before that he was damaged and but I think it was just a thing where before they went and switched the title from Adam Cole to Pete Dunne or anybody else, they wanted to get some of these people over. And for Adam Cole to get him over, he had to win his title defense.
Right.
With
Jeff, let me ask you a question. Yeah. What do you make of the fact that Britt Baker was featured prominently in the audience?
I don't think that she actually wasn't featured prominently. It was right after the War Games deal, and it was.
Why'd they make such a big deal, Jeff?
Because she's Britt Baker, she works for AEW, and therefore, because Dave Meltzer and the Oak want to make a big deal out of something that shouldn't have been made a big deal out of. And I mean, okay, do we buy Triple H's rhetoric? We didn't do it on purpose. Maybe, maybe not. I don't care. I really don't care.
Well, my understanding, Jeff, is they knew she was there and she had permission from AEW to be there.
Right, and I'm sure she did. I
mean, she was given a comp ticket.
Well, okay, here's the deal. Well, they always are, but...
Yeah, and she was sitting right next to Stephanie.
No. That was another show that she was sitting next to Stephanie on.
Oh, okay, I stand corrected.
Yeah, that was another takeover. But, I mean, they got her, and... That was not her overselling. That was just her natural reaction of, holy shit, my man just had the shit kicked out of him in a brutal match. And they happened to zoom in on her face because she had that reaction that the WWE honestly likes to get on camera, which is that, oh my goodness, that shock and awe of what I just saw was so brutal. I don't think that they did it on purpose. I think that it was just something that she happened to be there in the audience. I think it was an inexperienced camera guy that did not know not to put her on there. And if AEW...
And that's been actually brought up, Jeff.
Well, I'll say this. If AEW punishes her because of that, they're assholes. And
well, how could they punish her? She got permission to be there.
Well, if they punish her because of it, if we all of a sudden start seeing her getting buried or anything, they're assholes and they're going against everything that they preach.
Mikey, thoughts on it real quick?
I didn't have a problem with it. And I think, here's the thing. It actually helps both companies because... Here's three grown men talking.
That's my standpoint. Exactly.
Yeah. Here's three grown men talking about a woman watching a man wrestle. You know what I mean? So
exactly.
They got it once again, guys.
Exactly. All right. Well, Mikey, I am going to bring in a man you know very well. He's a friend of ours mutually. He is, for the benefit of people listening, he is the associate producer and actually associate producer of both The Wrestler and the film 350 Days. His name is Evan Ginzburg, and we are going to bring him in momentarily. So, Evan, are you ready, my friend? All right. I am on the phone, joined by the associate producer of not one, but two of the biggest wrestling genre films in the last 20 years. The Wrestler and 350 Days. He is an archivist, a wrestling historian. He is a guy I've known for the first time probably 19 years ago when I was invited to speak to his class at the Louis Armstrong School in Queens, New York. Please welcome Evan Ginzburg to the show. Evan, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Evan, I have a friend of yours with me, a guy you know fairly well, Mike, the movie maker Messier. He's with me. Say hi, Mike.
Hey, Evan, it's great to be here with you and through the wonder of Wrestling with the Future with Angelo and Jeff the Ref. And I've been on Evan's show in New York and had a great time. And Evan and I think we've seen each other in at least 3 states, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New York. So it's good to be here with him cyberly, so to speak.
Yeah, Mike gets more heat than anybody in wrestling, except for maybe Cornette and Meltzer. I love Mike.
It's perhaps possibly me, Evan.
Yeah.
Evan, let me introduce you to my co-host, Jeff the Ref. I call him the Guru.
Hey
Jeff,
there,
how
Evan. How are you doing?
Hi, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you doing, brother?
Good, thanks.
Real quick, I got to ask, what part of New York?
Well, right now I'm in Queens. I grew up in East Flatbush, Brooklyn.
Okay, that's actually where my granddad's from. He's from the Flatbush section of Brooklyn himself. So
Evan, they say, Evan, that you never forget your first time in love and in wrestling. I remember my first time, and talked about it on the show often, 1965 at the Philadelphia Arena. Bruno versus Killer Kowalski. When was your first time?
June 24th, 1974. I can tell you the day. That's how vivid it is. Bruno and Strongbow against Nikolai and Blassie at the Garden.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would never dream that one day Nikolai would be a friend and Walter Kowalski became a friend. So it's kind of surreal.
Yeah, I knew Killer very well.
Yeah, what a beautiful guy, soft-spoken. Walter, if he sat in a room with you and you didn't talk to him, he would just kind of sit there. He was actually shy.
He was,
it was amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Evan, he was painfully shy, really was. He was actually the guy, just a quick story, he was actually the guy who signed me up for the Cauliflower Alley Club. I got my lifetime membership through Walt.
There you go.
Did you say
beautiful person and one of the few people in this business that nobody has a bad word to say about, and the same with Nikolai. It's a dog-eat-dog business, and a lot of these guys have their detractors, but Walter and Nikolai, everybody loved these guys.
So, Evan, you're talking about 74. All right, I go back a little further than you. 74, 75. Bruno was at the probably at the end of his second run. Am I right about that?
More like the beginning of his second run.
Oh, the beginning of his second run. Okay.
He came in 73, and he lost to Billy Graham in 77.
That's right. I stand corrected. Thank you, Evan. So
no problem.
let me ask you, Evan, seeing this from the fans' perspective, and we've both been fans, and now we're, jaded by being on the inside a bit. Is the fan still in you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm not one of these old school guys who go, oh, these are just spot monkeys, and I don't write the whole thing off. I was watching Ray Phoenix and one of the Young Bucks the other week on AEW, and these guys were doing moves that Bruno couldn't have imagined. I mean, it's just
for sure.
and I enjoyed it. I mean, I don't dismiss the whole thing. What I don't like is if I turn on a Raw or a SmackDown and it's utterly cartoonish. I mean, to me, The Fiend versus Seth Rollins was your worst nightmare. It was like Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote minus the art. It was a cartoon, and that I don't like. But I'm at indie wrestling shows, many weekends, and I go to support wrestling in general. I'll give you an example. I had comps for a SmackDown taping at the Garden. And it was the first time in my life in almost 50 years that I walked out before it was over. It was just a relentless pounding of the senses. It was blasting sound and blasting air conditioning and just one ridiculous angle and ridiculous promo after another. And every hour or so you'd have an okay match, but you were numb by the end of it. And that I don't appreciate.
Evan, Mikey is chomping at the bit.
Evan,
Mikey.
It's Mikey Messier, Evan, angry wrestling fan, Mikey Messier. I had a follow-up. You just said about the Fiend Bray Wyatt and some of the supernatural stuff. I have a personal theory that back at Royal Rumble 1994, which took place in Providence, Rhode Island, the Undertaker-Yokozuna casket match that ended with the Undertaker kind of being buried by 10 or 12 bad guys, Erwin R. Shyster and the like. And then he kind of ascended to the heavens through the help of, the video editing and the special effects and the smoke and mirrors and the, obviously a post-production video. Now, it was very well executed. I mean, I have friends who were at that show in Providence as young guys, and they enjoyed it. And people at home really enjoyed it. What they did with that, and that gave The Undertaker an excuse to sit out and heal up some injuries. But my feeling is once the wrestling fans at that era, 1994, accepted that, heavenly ascension of The Undertaker, and nobody really called BS on it, that's when a lot of these seeds were planted for 30 super kicks a match or the Joey Ryan flips and so on and so forth.
I would have to disagree with you on that one, Mike. I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt Evan on that one. I'm sorry. I got to disagree with you on that one, Mike. I'll go ahead and let Evan take it, but then I'll say something.
Okay.
I did not like when The Undertaker did his Superman shtick where all of a sudden he would just get up like in the movie Halloween and stare at the guy. But, Hulk Hogan did the Superman shtick, and even to a certain degree, Bruno did the Superman shtick.
Exactly.
I mean, it's not all, ultra realistic, and Bruno wrestled guys like the Wolfman and other, cartoonish characters as well, but once you take the wrestling entirely out of it, like The Fiend and Seth Rollins, where, it's not even reality-based anymore. The other night when Daniel Bryan wrestled The Fiend, at least 2/3 of the match was wrestling. I enjoyed it somewhat. But, it turned cartoonish at the end. I don't mind the suspension of disbelief. Throughout wrestling, the little guy beats the guy who, would have murdered him in a street fight.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not all realistic, but when you take the realism entirely out of it, that's when you lose me.
Well, I think wrestling always needs its characters, though. I mean, you're going to need those type of characters, I think, and part of the way to get the Fiend over right now is by having him be your new modern-day Undertaker that is going to take that ass-kicking and keep on coming back no matter what happens to him. We all know that Bray actually can wrestle. He has that pedigree, third generation, Blackjack Mulligan's grandson, so you cannot take anything away from what that guy can do in the ring. Now, why?
Let me just quickly say something. I saw Bray Wyatt headline the Garden against John Cena, and they had a great match.
Yes, sir.
I saw Bray Wyatt headline the Garden against Roman Reigns, and they had a very good match. I wouldn't say great, but this guy can wrestle. So don't turn him into an absolute cartoon. I mean, he had a great stick to begin with, and you didn't have to put it over the edge where it's absurd. It's a guy in a Halloween mask, basically.
Well, yeah, but I think they kind of had to do that because they had pretty much essentially killed the original Bray Wyatt gimmick. I mean, they had all but killed that off by having the multiple losses, and then his world title win when he went in, even that Mania was flat. I mean, they had all but essentially killed off that character of the original Bray Wyatt concept. And
that's on them. I saw the guy headline the Garden 2 shows in a row. Next thing you know, he's in the opening match with one of the Hardys. I'm like, what happened? I don't even know.
Exactly.
Where did they make that decision?
It was bad writing. It was bad writing for him. But I want to go back really quick to what Mikey had said about the whole Undertaker ascending to the heavens and the fans believing it and buying into that. What I was going to say, Mike, I don't know that they bought it, but you're talking 1994. The business was falling so flat, it wasn't even funny. It's flatter than it is even now. And they were throwing any and everything against the wall to see what would stick. It wasn't that the fans bought into it as much as it was they just said, here, WWF did what they've always done, and that is, here, you're going to take it and you're going to believe it whether you want to or not. It wasn't back then. You didn't have the internet, so you didn't have Twitter to where you had 100,000 voices crapping on it all at one time.
I hear what you're saying, Jeff. I guess my point is that because there wasn't a whole lot of backlash from fans at the time, things like that, the Papa Shango gimmick at the time, 1992, 25 years later or so, we're seeing things like The Fiend or like 30 Super Kicks a Match or Kenny Omega wrestling a plastic doll in Japan, Joey Ryan with his...
I don't think that's what led to the progression of Joey Ryan doing dick flips and Kenny Omega wrestling dolls and 8-year-old kids. I mean, there's
ultimately we're talking about characters. So, Evan, my question for you, did somebody like Vince Russo ultimately hurt the business with all his characters?
I did not appreciate a lot of what Vince Russo did, the one finger pinning of a world champion and, nonsense like that. But at least at that time, when you had the Monday Night Wars, you had a lot of great wrestling mixed in with the nonsense. You could pick and choose. You could TiVo whatever you wanted to watch and not watch. Today, if you watch a 3-hour Raw, generally, if there's 20 or 30 minutes of quality wrestling, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And inevitably, that's marred by, 17 commercials in the middle of the matches or a screw job finish.
Yeah.
My point is this. I'm not one of these guys who just, pisses on the whole thing. This is one of the greatest talent bases in the history of the business that WWE has. And they squander it for the most part. They just waste these tremendous wrestlers.
That's my issue.
Yeah, and in many cases, you go from best in the world, like a top 5 or top 10 in the world, like Daniel Bryan or Nakamura, and next thing you know, they're just another guy on the show. They basically neutered them, and it's a shame because, I would watch Daniel Bryan and Ring of Honor have great matches, every time I saw him in New York. Now it's hit and miss. He'll have a great night, and other nights he's just another guy on a meaningless pay-per-view or whatnot. And I don't think they do good by these guys.
I think part of that, though, is when you got a roster of 70 guys, how do you got to give, and not everybody's going to have that opportunity. And when you got to intermingle different guys in and out of, and leave them in and out, it's hard to do that when you got that big of a roster and you got 35 riders trying to inundate with a roster of that size.
That's a whole nother.
That's kind of why they are where they are right now, and why it is a hit or miss deal, because somebody may be writing for Daniel Bryan today, and in 3 weeks they're fired.
All right, Evan, your thoughts on writers in wrestling?
Yeah, do a lot less writing and just let them wrestle.
Thank you.
Put Daniel Bryan and AJ Styles in a match. Say go 20 minutes and kill. I mean, you don't need Daniel Bryan surrounded by bodyguards and guys running in and out and all this nonsense. Excuse me, AJ Styles surrounded by bodyguards and. Just let these guys create art. These guys are artists. I saw AJ Styles and Nakamura at Wrestle Kingdom. It was as great as anything I've ever seen. I mean, unleash these guys. Stop writing. Let these guys wrestle. Come on.
Exactly. Thank you so much for saying that. You know, how does it, you know, Evan, you're a little younger than I, but we're in the same ballpark. So here's my question. And I've had this ongoing discussion with Jeff. He's a young guy. He's like 40-ish.
42.
He's a baby. Him and Mike are babies.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm 60. How does a guy like me, who has that old school mentality, open up his mind to accept what I'm being shown, what I'm being fed? How do I grow to like it?
You don't have to. You pick and choose. There's a glut of wrestling on TV. You don't have to watch everything. It's the whole religious fervor thing. I must watch Raw. I must watch SmackDown. I must watch everything. No, you don't. I'm not going to watch every bad movie that comes out. I'm not going to watch every bad TV show. Pick and choose. You have tons of wrestling, quote unquote, journalists these days, and if enough of them say this match is great, there's a good chance the match is great. Watch the one match. You don't have to watch the whole pay. You don't have to watch the whole pay-per-view. You don't have to. My goal in life is not to sit in front of a TV or computer and just watch things. I want to create art. Mike Messier is a filmmaker. He wants to create art. The goal isn't just to sit in front of a TV or computer 24/7. So the best advice I could give people is, create your own content. And, don't watch crap. Sometimes I watch this stuff and it's like a knife in my heart. I'm old school.
I hear you.
I sat in the garden and saw Tiger Mask and Dynamite Kid and Snooker in Morocco. It's like, I don't, Roddy Piper is a hero. I mean, I don't need to watch mediocrity. I'll just turn it off if I'm not enjoying it. And sometimes it's beyond not enjoying it. It's painful sometimes.
Go ahead, Mike.
I wanted to say that I rewatched 350 Days, which is one of Evan Ginzburg's film creations. And it really warmed my heart to see my old friend Ox Baker in the kitchen cooking up a nice meal for himself. And also, what I found interesting about the movie, Evan, among many interesting aspects, was the raw honesty about such topics as steroids, such topics as what they used to call Vena rats or female groupies. And also, I liked the photography. There was a sequence kind of maybe 20 or 30 minutes into the film where you showed us a set of black and white photography from World Class Championship Wrestling around the 1982-83 era. And I knew distinctly what that was because recently I've been watching a series of Blu-ray discs of World Class Wrestling from 82 and 83. And it was right when the Freebirds came in. They had Hussein Arab, I think, was a manager, a manager who's also a commentator. Iceman King Parsons. You saw Andre the Giant was doing a lot of shots in Texas in 82. King Kong Bundy was there with a full head of hair for a while. And there's other parts of 350 Days, which people can watch on Amazon Prime Video for free if they have Amazon Prime. And there are many times in that movie where you kind of go to a certain territory and you see a collection of photos from a certain territory. There's also fans or friends of yours, Evan, must have donated photographs because sometimes you'll see a series of photographs with different wrestlers, whether it's Greg Valentine or whoever else, with one specific.
Let me address that. Evan, you and I have a mutual friend who was instrumental in 350 Days. A lot of the photographs featured in the film are from the archive collection of the wrestling maven Eric Rosen. It's a very dear friend of mine.
Yep, Eric's a good guy. I know Eric forever, and basically as associate producer, one of my many jobs was to track down certain photos. The editor, Michael Burlingame, worked with Mariah Carey and Paul McCartney, serious editor. And he would say, for example, can you find me a picture of Greg Valentine getting out of a car? It's easy enough to find somebody in the ring. So this became like a whole hunt. Because the point of 350 Days is they were on the road endlessly.
Yeah.
Sex, drugs, rock and roll, never at home, wrestling, Starcade, Survivor Series, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and it was a brutal lifestyle. So I said to Mike Burlingame, I said, listen, the last thing the world needs is another shoot interview. I said, make a movie where a 70-year-old woman who hates wrestling would cry. That's what I said to him. Let's make a movie, not a shoot interview.
Exactly.
The bombardment of information is out there already.
I appreciated the fact that you did that, Evan, and on several levels. You were able, during the making of this film, to capture what would be the last filmed appearance of more than 30 people who are no longer with us.
Yeah, we have in that movie Ox Baker, the Wolfman, Larry Sharp, Snooker, George Steele. These guys are all gone, and it wasn't like the paparazzi were following the Wolfman. You know what I'm saying? So
exactly.
We're very proud that we captured these guys. Angela Mosca right now is not in great health, and so we, it's a. J.J. Dillon was very moved by it, and he said, "You guys preserved our history," and and they were very honest and open. Some were friends, some were strangers. When we interviewed them, and we're very proud of it. And same with the wrestler. I mean, Aronofsky was a casual, mid-'80s wrestling fan. He's 50-ish at this point, and basically he said, let's capture this. Let's really, and I would take these guys to indie shows every weekend. And one time I took them to a convention, and you had Moolah, Mae Young, Captain Lou, Nikolai, Iron Sheik, etc., so on, all the legends, and there was nobody there. There was nobody there. And Sheik's head was on the table sleeping. And it was depressing. And the screenwriter, Rob Siegel, wrote that depressing autograph scene, that convention scene, into the script, long after the script was written. On a later draft, because it was just so sad to see that. And, it's not all glamorous. People think it's very glamorous,
It's been said, Evan, that the wrestler was the most realistic depiction of the life of a professional wrestler ever captured on film. Do you agree with that, Evan?
I'd like to think so. I mean, we sat in the dressing rooms. We were at CZW Cage of Death in the dressing room. It was like a mass unit afterwards. It was bizarre, absolutely bizarre. And the more we spoke with these guys, talking about being ripped off by promoters and being exploited, and it's not fun and games. And I think both films, captured the reality of it all without just being depressing. I mean, The Wrestler had its lighter moments, and so did 350 Days. We didn't want to make it just grim and beat the viewers down either,
Sure. Jeff has a question for you. Go ahead, Jeff, go ahead.
Sure.
real quick, how long did it take you to film overall? And I'm not talking like from the editing process. I'm just saying like getting all the interviews together for 350 days. How long of a process was that? Was that like a couple years time span or?
350 days from start to finish was 6 years. The Wrestler was 7 years from start to finish. People have no idea what goes into a project when you care enough to do a quality project. I mean, you could churn something out in 3 weeks if you chose to, but 350 days was 6 years, because what people don't realize is it's thousands of hours of editing. Mike as a filmmaker would understand this. We had about 90 hours of footage that was whittled down to about an hour 48. 90 hours. You know, a lot of people got cut out, you know, and that's a big decision. But again, what I said to Michael Burlingame, our editor, I said, I want the most poignant, powerful. That's what I want to see in this movie. You know, I said, forget the feuds. It's been done to death. Who was the booker in Chattanooga in 1979? We've heard this 1,000 times. I said, I want you to touch people with this movie. And I knew, because the guy was not a wrestling guy. You have to understand something. He was not a wrestling guy, our editor. So he didn't know Billy Graham from the Wolfman. You follow? It's like he was just picking out the best material, and ultimately, Billy Graham has so much charisma. He could read the phone book, you'd be riveted. And Bret Hart, it's like yin and yang. One's very soft-spoken, one's very charismatic and outspoken, and it just worked. It's like they became the stars, really, Billy Graham and Bret Hart. And, you know, Greg Valentine and Tito and all these guys were great, too. But, you know, it's like the cream rises to the top. And that's what happened with this movie.
To me, Bret, at the very end of it, in 350 days, came across, as he tends to in a lot of interviews these days, as still being somewhat bitter at how his career ended, unfortunately. And he makes a point of letting everybody know he got his head kicked in, he got a concussion, and Bill Goldberg was the cause of it, and goes from there. I was going to ask you, though, this is something I was wondering. Did Billy Graham make it? Did he tell you guys he wanted to make mention of the liver transplant and the girl who gave it to him? Was that like part of his?
Yeah. And again, as filmmakers, we thought that human interest story was very powerful and poignant, and we wanted it in there rather than, you know, tell us about your feud with Bruno for the 400th time. We thought that was, you know, more powerful, and he wanted that in there.
It was. No, I was just wondering, like, because in every interview I've ever seen of him since he's had that liver transplant, he makes sure he mentions her by name and what she went through and the sacrifice that she made for him, and how everybody should be, you know, donating, you know, their when they pass away, to donate your body parts. Now I got a question for you. Somebody who I know that you are deeply attached to, and I've always wondered about because she's very fascinating to a lot of people, Nicole Bass.
Oh yeah, Nicole was the sweetest, kindest person you'd ever want to meet, and she was like a walking parade. Anywhere she'd go, people would recognize her. You know, she was the world's largest female bodybuilder, and we were very close. And she would say, I'd say, Nicole, come over. I'm having a New Year's party or birthday party, whatever. And, you know, sometimes she would, and other times she'd be like, Evan, I don't feel like being Nicole Bass today. You know, I don't feel like, are you really a guy and all of this nonsense. And the funny thing with her is, you know, she was very feminine. She loved when people said, you know, you look pretty tonight, you look nice tonight. And it's funny, you know, she had a very warm spot for Howard Stern and everything. But sometimes, you know, when you're constantly being watched, and, you know, it wore on us sometimes.
Yeah. In the interest of full disclosure, and I don't even know if you know this, Evan, but I was very close with Nicole as well.
Oh, so you know what I'm talking about.
Exactly. She was a sweet, sweet lady. And I think her biggest problem, something that, and you know this, Evan, that bothered her a lot is that she was grossly misunderstood.
Oh, yeah. She wanted to work with kids. She had a lot of frustrations in life. And she used to say, it's not easy being different. We can walk down the street and, 99 out of 100 people won't know who we are. But everywhere she went, she was recognized. And people don't realize she was a success in wrestling, in bodybuilding, and in radio. She went to the top in 3 different, genres, which is really almost unheard of. And she was very well recognized. Plus, she had a unique look. So, when you're the world's largest female bodybuilder, and you walk into a restaurant, people tend to notice. And,
Evan, I don't know. I've heard a story. I don't know how much truth there is, how much validity. But are you, in fact, the last person who ever saw her?
I was not the last person, but I was there at her hospital on her deathbed the night before they pulled the plug. And, so I was not there the next day when they physically did it, but I was there the very night before. And I got on the subway to go home, and I was shell-shocked. I was just like trying not to cry the whole time on a crowded, packed subway. It was brutal, and she was hooked up to all kinds of wires, and the doctors had said there was no brainstem activity or whatever. I'm giving you the layman's version of it. I'm not a medical person. And, you're just looking at her and you go, man, it's over. It's freaking over. And it was brutal. And I wrote a piece about her for ProWrestlingStories.com. That's, really from the heart.
Yeah.
And I felt the same way when Johnny Valiant was hit by the car. We were very close.
Yeah.
And,
well, I was going to ask you about Johnny,
Yeah, Johnny, was probably one of the funniest men alive.
Oh, he was hilarious.
Yeah, and the Valiant brothers, if you're old enough, and Angelo and I are, when the Valiant brothers were on top, I mean, the garden would shake. The garden would shake. Sheer charisma. No entrance music, no pyro, no nothing. Just the Valiants and Lou Albano walking down the aisle. And the charisma was off the charts. It was Dusty Rhodes, Billy Graham, Roddy Piper level charisma. And unfortunately, it was 10 years before the boom period, 9 or 10 years, and they didn't get the big money. Johnny told me he never broke $100,000 in his life in wrestling, and so they're almost forgotten by a certain portion of the audience because a lot of wrestling fans think wrestling started with Hogan and Piper, Rock and
that's what bothers me, Evan. I have memories. My first memory of watching pro wrestling was 64 on television. I saw my first show.
I started at 72,
Yeah, my first show was 65. And when you talk, in these little chat groups on, Facebook and Twitter and what have you, social media, you're the disgruntled old man that wants his wrestling back. So I will be that disgruntled old man. I'm still holding out hope that will come along. I think the biggest problem, Evan, I want your opinion on this. The biggest problem is that the company now is bigger than the personalities. There was a time when if you knew Bruno, you knew he was a wrestler. You didn't have to know anything else that Bruno was a wrestler. Yeah. Now it's all the WWE, this and that and whatever. And the personalities are secondary.
Well, years ago, I lose track of time, maybe 10, 15 years, the McMahons actually did an interview and said, we wanted it to be the WWE experience. where fans would come regardless of the main event, and they actually said, we don't want one guy to have, all the power, like a Hogan, where it's all, around one guy.
Yeah, but they drew people to the arenas. We had this discussion a couple of weeks ago on the show that there's no arena business. There's no house business anymore.
Well, I want you to think about this. The Garden has a mediocre lineup December 26th. Eric Rowan against Seth Rollins on top. $31 to $206. $206 ringside. So imagine your mommy and daddy with two kiddies, and you bought four $206 tickets before the parking, the food, and the gimmicks. You're talking $1,000 evening for a mediocre card of wrestling.
Yeah.
Okay? So not everybody could even afford that. Even at $31 a ticket times 4. When you start with, mommy, daddy, get me a T-shirt, get me this, get me that.
Yeah.
Get me an $8 soda. You're talking hundreds and hundreds of dollars.
Sure.
So what happens instead of running a monthly card like when we were kids, they're running quarterly or 3 shows a year, maybe 4 shows a year. So, it becomes, this is your Christmas present. This is your graduation present. The whole business has changed. It's a TV and WWE network business.
Yeah, exactly.
And hawking T-shirts and hawking gimmicks. It's not about selling tickets to the arena anymore. It's almost, the card's almost a throwaway. It's like, if you get one or two good matches, you're lucky.
Go ahead, Mikey.
Evan, this is Mike again. What you just said about the WWE current live show experience is very true. So does that leave a hole for things like there was a group called Top Rope Promotions out of Fall River, Massachusetts. That was a real throwback federation that I used to be a commentator for, and they brought guys like Tommaso Ciampa, Vinny Marseglia, Matt Taven, Dominik Dijakovic, a lot of the top guys, like half the guys I saw at NXT TakeOver War Games last weekend came out of Top Rope Promotions. Isn't there a groundswell of smaller promotions, even smaller than Ring of Honor or Impact, like places that they're happy if they get 200 or 400 fans? Hasn't been there a regrowth of those types of smaller promotions in the last?
Oh, absolutely. You could go to indie wrestling shows pretty much every weekend in New York now, and some of them are quite good. And the talent varies from great veterans to utterly green kids, without gear. It varies like anything else. But I'll tell you, I have more fun at a local indie, where everybody's giving 110% than I do at a WWE show where, you're sitting in the Garden and going, man, I'm like in a sea of, kiddies. There's little kids. You're surrounded by little kids.
Yeah.
But since the 1980s, you've been surrounded by little kids in the WWE. Since the 1980s, since Hulk Hogan, you've had little kids. That's what they've geared their product towards. And, that's what drives their dollars ultimately. Now, I got a quick question for you, Evan. Doing a little bit of research on you, buddy. Can you tell me about some apartment wrestling?
Apartment wrestling? I think you're confusing that with my book. I wrote a book, Apartment 4B, like in Brooklyn, about growing up in East Flatbush in the 60s and 70s.
Apartment house wrestling? Yeah. Well,
no. Apartment 4B, like in Brooklyn. It's an autobiographical short story collection about growing up in Brooklyn in the 60s and 70s.
I got you. Okay, I'm sorry. I mistook it. I was sitting there thinking it was like the after mags of the girls in the...
No, not at all. No, it's about growing up white in a black neighborhood, the good, the bad, and ugly of that.
Well, like I said, my granddad...
That sounds like a wrestling show.
My granddad.
I wrestled myself out of plenty of fights. Yeah.
My granddad grew up in Flatbush, but he was there in the 1920s and 30s, and then he was out of there by the 40s when the war broke out. So
it was rough by 74.
Yeah.
Let me put it that way.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people, they look at me kind of funny when I tell them I got relatives that, were from the Flatbush section. That's like a lot of where my, of my mom's roots were in New York. She's not from New York, but a lot of her family is from Long Island and Brooklyn and around the city. Now, I mean, I get what you were saying about the Garden and it not selling out and all that. I think part of the is fans don't turn out for house shows anymore because they rather turn out for the big shows, for the lights, cameras, actions, and the pay-per-views and the Raws or a SmackDown than they would a house show.
I was at the SmackDown tapings, and there were thousands of empty seats. I mean, but they were running Raw and SmackDown, back to back. It's still, they're still making money and selling tickets. It's very expensive to rent the Garden also.
Oh, yeah, that's what they've said. And, I mean, when they used to run it monthly, it wasn't probably the same expense, and you also were able to drive. I mean, I'll say this is what I said to Angelo during our conversation, a few weeks ago. I think part of what drove house shows was you had squash matches on TV, and you weren't giving away those kind of matches. I mean, you weren't giving away your money matches on TV every week. You made them want to go to a house show to go watch it. And now when you don't have that and you got a Seth Rollins versus a Daniel Bryan on a Raw, why am I going to go to my house show to go see it?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Eric Rowan against Seth Rollins, which is, an okay match, but certainly not worth $206.
No.
It's like, I mean, I could live without seeing it again live. I have no intention of going to that.
Price point on tickets alone is insane. I mean, the last pay-per-view I went to here in Norfolk, I want to say I paid, and I sat front row ringside, I maybe paid $30 or $40.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair price if the show is good. I'll tell Mike, this is for Mikey Messier. He'll appreciate this. Okay, I'm sitting with a filmmaker in a restaurant one day, and we're talking about a project that we're working on. So this guy overhears our conversation, and he's telling us about his $800 WrestleMania ticket, $800. So we're telling him about our independent film that we spent years and thousands of hours editing, and the guy didn't want to spring for $20 to support it, and actually says, I don't pay for any content. I download everything for free. So he's got $800 for the monster corporation, but he doesn't have $20 for an independent filmmaker. This is also part of the problem. When people say, oh, you have to experience WrestleMania, or I got my $5,000 ticket, and I'm like, a fool and his money is soon parted. I don't get it. To see, Triple H come to the ring on a motorcycle or whatever, I don't see that as a $5,000 evening. I'd rather go to Asia or Europe on a beautiful vacation for $5.
Exactly.
I just don't get. I don't get it.
Let me win the lotto as a diehard fan, and I'm all over WrestleMania, and I'm paying that $5 to sit there front row. I don't give a damn.
I hear what Evan's saying, though. It's true that folks often will and that's part of the problem of being a filmmaker, or the challenge is a lot of people are so spoiled by whether it's online downloading by for free, which basically means stealing, bootlegging material, or something pops up on YouTube. The consumer or the audience has become trained to feel that they are so empowered or entitled not to pay for content. And what they're ensuring is that independent film voices like Evan Ginzburg's, Mike Messier's, will not be heard as loudly. So the consumer, for instance, when AEW did a pay-per-view last month, I paid for the money. I paid the $50 to watch their show out of Baltimore because I figured these guys are busting their butts. They're hammering themselves. I don't agree with everything they do, but I'm going to support them. And so if people do want to see Evan Ginzburg's movie 350 Days, if you have an Amazon Prime membership, you can see it that way. I'm sure, Evan, there's websites and so forth. They can see it in other ways.
It's on tons of platforms. They can watch it on Tubi, TUBI. They can order the DVD itself if they want a hard copy Blu-ray. 350daysthemovie.com. There's all kinds of hats and T-shirts if they want to support independent film. Hey, I don't know anything about this, but they said there's a Bruno documentary opening in New York this week.
Oh, I know nothing about that, Evan.
Yeah, it's down at Cinema Village, which is a nice little art house, and I don't know anything about the film itself, but it's a full-length documentary on Bruno that's actually playing in a theater. So I'd be curious.
Yeah, the only film I know of that was full feature on Bruno himself was a film called La Mia Mama. That he did. They actually took him back to Italy to find his childhood home, and they found it. And they showed you his family there, and he met relatives and people that he hadn't known since he was a kid.
This is a full-length documentary?
Yeah, it sure is. It's called La Mia Mama.
Who's the director? Do you know?
I don't, but the entire film is on YouTube.
Oh, okay. La Mia Mama.
Yeah, I'll send you a link for it.
I was going to read you about
the Kowalski documentary coming out too.
I was going to read you about the Bruno documentary really quick. It says the long-anticipated documentary. I'm reading this straight from the press release from News Radio 1020 KDKA out of Pittsburgh. The long-anticipated documentary about the late Pittsburgh wrestler Bruno Sammartino is being released. Bruno Sammartino is the name of the film. It will launch this Friday in New York City and in LA and will debut around the world this spring. The film features actors, politicians, bodybuilder Arnold Schwarzenegger, wrestler, actor John Cena, The Miz, and Stan Hansen. The film will explore how Sammartino, born in, I can't even say the name of the town, in Italy.
Abruzzi?
Pisa
Okay, there you go. And came to the U.S. after World War II. Before his passing, he told his close friend of 30 years, Larry Rochert, of KDKA radio morning show co-host and producer and narrator of the film, about what it meant to him to be in America. And then it goes on to say about it, trying to look for times. I don't see any times, but once again, that was on the KDKA AM 1020 AM News Radio press release. So anybody interested?
I would tell people, go out and support it. It's an indie film. It's not a WWE propaganda film. It's an indie film. And, another thing is people should be kind and review these things positively.
Yes.
If they enjoy it. If you look at the reviews for 350 Days on Amazon, it's like we got tons of 5-star reviews, and then we got a handful of 1-star reviews by people that just didn't get it. They didn't get it. It's like, I knew a lot of this information already. Like they're watching a shoot interview.
Yeah.
It's like, why go out of your way to be critical of a small independent film instead of support the thing? So I would tell people to go check out this Bruno movie. I have no connection with it, but I just love Bruno, so I want to see the thing succeed.
I was going to say, Amazon Prime owes you a residual from me because I've had them ever since that movie got released on Prime, and I have not let go of my Prime since. But I honestly downloaded Amazon Prime to my PS4, the app to my PS4, just so I could watch that movie, honest to God.
Oh, thank you. Well, while you're on Amazon Prime, check out Wrestling Then and Now, which I produced 17 years ago.
Already.
And, it was done on pennies, And it's not on the level, obviously, of the wrestler, but it's from the heart.
Well, let's talk about that, Evan. Let's talk about your involvement with the film. You know, I first met Evan Ginzburg almost 19 years ago. You were a school teacher, and you invited me to speak to your class, and I brought some wrestlers with me. How does a guy go from being a teacher to doing what he loves to do for a living, and and producing a film? It's kind of a crazy journey. It's got to be. It has to be a story there.
Is everything you do leads to something else. Mikey could tell you this as well. I was doing a newsletter for 20 years, Wrestling Then and Now, and that led to, hey, why don't you come on my radio show, Fred Giabold at WBAI FM? That led to meeting wrestlers, et cetera, so on. And when I was teaching kids, I brought wrestlers to the classroom, and that led to Johnny Valiant saying, "Be my agent, book me," and one thing always leads to another. So I was doing agent work for years, booking guys for autograph appearances and indie shows, and that led to Aronofsky's people hearing about me. So then they invited me to be the associate producer on The Wrestler, which led to 350 Days, which leads to other things. One thing always leads to another. And Wrestling Then and Now, it's funny, it's kind of like, how is this, soft-spoken, mild-mannered school teacher surrounded by guys like Killer, Kowalski, Homicide, low-life Louis Ramos, and basically the filmmaker followed me around, and we went to meet these colorful characters, and we did this movie on pennies, and amazingly, with this boom cycle now in wrestling, there's like a renewed interest in it.
It sure is.
Nikolai, I'm in it, and Nikolai just passed, and
yes,
and these guys are legends. Dr. Death Arnold is in it. You remember him back at the Olympic? Dr. Death Arnold.
I do.
He was a buddy of mine. He was colorful. He was a nudist. He used to go down to the nudist colony.
Yes.
He was a colorful guy. Yeah.
Hopefully not in the arena. I wanted to ask. This is Mike again. I wanted to ask both Angelo and Evan, because the Bruno era was before my time and Jeff's time, and I caught the tail end of like the Blackjack Mulligan, Bob Backlund era. But I wanted to ask you guys, could you paint a portrait of the Madison Square Garden, the Nassau Coliseum, Philadelphia Spectrum? Because what I get upset about as a wrestling fan, when I was a young wrestling fan, I would study the magazines, and they'd have these columns in Sports Review Wrestling about 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And I was always fascinated by the Dory Funk Juniors and the Gray Misfitos and all these wrestlers that were before my time. And I really get sick of hearing the WWE corporate machine talk about how Vince McMahon stomped out the cigar smoky days of the arena, because me, that seemed like a lot more fun. So I was wondering, could you
tell you, Mikey, my days precede the Philadelphia Spectrum. I go back to the Philadelphia arena before the Spectrum was, a twinkle in the eye. I can surmise it in a couple of words, maybe a sentence or two. There was a sense of believability. People came not knowing what to expect because they weren't yet smart to the business. Now, there's no mystique anymore. The biggest thing, Evan, correct me if I'm wrong at any point, but the biggest thing is there's no mystique. There's nothing left to the imagination. It's like seeing a beautiful woman totally naked. She may have stretch marks. She may have moles on her body, but when she's covered up, she looks gorgeous.
Well, let me jump in. if you went to Madison Square Garden in the mid to late 70s and Bruno Sammartino or Pedro Morales walked down the aisle, the fans loved them. Loved them. I mean, it was like hero worship. And when Bruno was pinned by Ivan Koloff, the place went silent and people were crying, actually crying. And you can't create that with like a monster corporation, you know. It's indescribable. And when Bruno walked down the aisle in a pair of black tights, again with no music, pyro, no 18 announcers calling it, the guy just walked down the aisle. You could feel the building shake. And they loved this man, and the same with Pedro. And it was almost disgraceful that WWE basically forgot about Pedro until he died. Exactly. And then you do like the 30-second TV tribute. It was almost like, that was before the Hulkamania, so it didn't count.
I don't think
it drew tremendous money for them, year after year. And I'll tell you something that people don't realize about Pedro. When the Intercontinental title was brought in, that's because Backlund wasn't the draw that Bruno was. So that Intercontinental belt on many nights, those title defenses meant as much or more than Backlund's matches. And many times you'd have Pedro or Morocco or Ken Patera or Pat Patterson. I mean, these guys were huge stars on their own. And that made that Intercontinental belt mean something. Today, it's one of 37 belts, and it's meaningless.
This is Jeff really quick. I was going to chime in. You had mentioned about Bruno and Ivan in the Garden. Ivan Koloff is a very, very good dear friend of mine, Uncle Ivan, and love him to death and miss him every day. I used to be able to pick up the phone and call him, and have him answer his phone, even if he was out to dinner with his family. And I mean, me and him we were very close. Now, I would get chills every time he would tell me the story about the time that he lost or won the belt in the Garden. And the fact that they didn't even announce him as the winner until he had got to the back because they were that afraid of a riot breaking out with Bruno.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, when Bruno lost that, you remember, Evan, when Bruno lost the title, the place was silent.
Yeah.
They didn't know what happened.
He said,
Baltimore against Graham.
I've excited
and against Koloff. Yeah, absolutely. Let me just say something about Ivan Koloff. Okay. Ivan Koloff headlined the Garden 13 times. Okay. He won the belt back when it meant something. Now, WWE knew the man was dying. And there's nobody, more worthy of being in the Hall of Fame than Ivan Koloff. How disgraceful, utterly disgraceful that they did not put him in. The whole petty grudges.
Yeah. We have the backstory to that, Evan, and that comes from Jeff. Go ahead, Jeff.
The deal was this is part of Bruno getting in there and going in was he told them, in order for me to even come up here and accept going into your Hall of Fame, and he told Triple H, not even the old man, Vince McMahon, he said, you will have Ivan Koloff here, you will allow him to be here, and you will allow him to be around with me throughout the whole ceremonies. And he said, you have to promise me that you'll put Ivan in the following year. They said, no problem, you got our word guarantee. Because they said, we don't want to overshine you, Bruno, on your big day. Ivan even agreed to it. The following year comes up, Ivan's due to go in. They make a play for the Puerto Rican WWC tape library. Carlos Colon said, you want my tape library, you're going to put me into the Hall of Fame. And they screwed Ivan out of the Hall of Fame bid that year. Then Blackjack Mulligan went to Ivan and he said, hey, I'm part of this big concussion lawsuit. Are you willing? Will you please just join in? And Ivan said, I don't know that I had, if and when I had any of my concussions. And can I really point to it all being in the WWF. No, he said, I suffered them throughout my whole career. And he said, so I really don't feel comfortable doing this, but out of loyalty to you and because you're one of my best friends, I'll sign up. He signed up. As soon as he did, he knew it. He called me the day he signed it. And he said, I just screwed myself out of the Hall of Fame, Jeff. And I said, why? Yeah. And he told me, he said, as soon as they see my name linked to this, he said, I'm not going to get the bid. And he said, but he was like, I'm loyal to Blackjack. As soon as Blackjack died, the day Blackjack died, Ivan's calling up the next day to the lawyer saying, take me off of the lawsuit. I don't want to be a part of it no more. He called Vince. He called Triple H. He's written letters, emails. And he said, I'm no longer in this. You know, I did it out of loyalty to Blackjack. I hope you all would understand. Blah, 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 whatever. And I'm sorry, you know, anyway, he knew what and unfortunately, that ultimately is because he was part of that lawsuit that they won't look past it now. And I got a hunch now if they're going to put him in instead of giving him his just due and giving him that true 30 or 45 minute long set, they're going to just put him in that posthumously 13-man conglomerate that they do where they go, these are the legends of the past that paved the way for the guys of today. And that's what they're going to throw him in there. And that's a shame. It's a damn shame.
They put Bruiser Brody.
What about the millions of dollars he generated headlining arenas against Bruno and Backlund? You know,
what about the fact that he was due to get the belt off of Backlund instead of going
shameful.
Well, on behalf of our mutual friend Ox Baker, on behalf of Leon White, Big Van Vader, there's a tremendous amount of talent that's not in the WWE Hall of Fame, whether it's through people being overlooked or politics. And then, no offense, but you have people like Tori Wilson, who's a gorgeous woman and athletically fit, and I'm not taking anything away from her. But you have some people in the WWE Hall of Fame that you'd have to question, why isn't it Ivan Koloff, Ox Baker, or Big Van Vader? Why are they not in, and certain other people are in? And to me,
let me just throw this in. I've done radio and TV and film for 30 years, and whenever I interview legends, whose name comes up among the greatest of all time? Ray Stevens, who also was a main event guy for them during the Pedro era.
Absolutely.
How do you not put Ray Stevens in the WWE Hall of Fame?
Everybody thought
Ray the Triple Stevens, absolutely.
Was going to go in when they were out in WrestleMania out there a couple of years out west a few years ago, and he didn't go in then. I really am surprised that they haven't put him in with Pat Patterson being one of his best friends. Ric Flair even saying he got his over-the-top rope bump from him. How Flair said it, he was disappointed if he went to see a Ray Stevens match and Ray didn't hit the flip. I mean, it's, you know, Ray Stevens is definitely one of those names that should be in there. I think now, Mike, I think Vader will get his bid in there. I really do. I think Vader will probably. I expect him to be in there within the next few years. I don't think that I don't think that he left a sour taste in anybody's mouth. When he was up there. I mean,
but oddly, Jeff, that Vader was very clear and tweeted out that he was sick and given 2 years to live, and Mick Foley petitioned for Vader to get in the Hall of Fame before.
I remember that.
I guess it's just one of those things where, to me, you don't need a WWE Hall of Fame ring to be a legend, as is evidenced by so many great people in 350 days.
Yes.
And my own piece with Ox Baker, Vince Russo recently featured on the Vince Russo YouTube channel. I wanted to ask Evan a question, though, while we are talking with him. Evan, I'm sure people have asked you this question before, so I don't want you to feel like you have to single out one particular match, but can you name just a match that you saw live in person that was either a fun match to watch or an epic match? It doesn't have to be your all-time singular favorite, but maybe a match that you saw that left an impression you haven't spoken about in a previous interview.
Well, I tell people all the time that we were sitting in the Garden in early 80s. I forget the exact year. And the WWF was always like a super heavyweight, territory, because you need a big monster to be a threat to Pedro, a threat to Bruno, a threat to Backlund. So all of a sudden, Tiger Mask and Dynamite Kid come out. And this was pre-internet, so, we had vaguely heard of them. You might have seen a picture or two in a magazine or whatnot. And these guys were doing moves that we had never seen. It's like you were seeing the future. It was right there, Dynamite Kid and Tiger Mask. And it's like after it was over, you could breathe again. That's how electric it was. And that really stands out for me. And over the years, God, the War Games in Philly and the NWA was electric.
Oh yeah,
who was in that?
Horsemen. Yeah.
I'm just curious, who was in that War Games that you saw?
It was nice for Horsemen, and Dylan would get pinned, but it was great. It was great.
No. I know that. I know the Horsemen, of course, but I was wondering who was on the babyface side, because they alternated that from time to time. Like the
it was always Dusty and the Road Warriors. It's all a blur because I saw it 4 or 5 times, but the War Games was electric. I was there when Snuka jumped off the cage on Morocco, and we had never seen anything like that, and we were like, no, he's not going to do it, is he? And all of a sudden he's leaping off the cage, and he leapt upwards first. It wasn't like he was just leaping down, and you saw like 1,000 flash cubes. It's like etched in my memory forever.
You were in attendance the same night as Mick Foley.
What's that?
Go ahead, Jeff.
You were in attendance at the same show Mick Foley was, that infamous Morocco and Snuka card.
Oh yeah. It was.
Now I was going to read.
That was electric. Bruno and Superstar Billy Graham was electric. And I tell people some of the best nights of my life was seeing heel Piper at the Garden in the mid '80s. Oh my God! It was like a tornado hit the place, and then 10 minutes later or whatnot, you could breathe. That's the best way to explain it. And Piper and Orton together, it was just unbelievable.
Evan, I was going to read you really quick before we let you go. I just thought you'd find it kind of interesting. The results of your very first card that you ever went to, that you said there at Madison Square Garden, June the 24th, 1974. You had Jose Gonzalez defeating Tony Altimore. The WWF Tag Team title.
There's a name from the past.
Jimmy and Johnny Valiant defeated Dean Ho and Tony Gurria in the 2 out of 3 falls match.
Oh my God, Dean Ho.
Yeah.
Haystacks Calhoun and Larry Zbyszko defeated Otto von Heller and Killer Kowalski.
Great match.
Giant Baba and defeated Gorilla Monsoon.
Yeah, Baba and Monsoon were on their knees mid-ring just chopping each other. It was great.
Yeah.
I'm assuming this is the Baba from Japan, right?
Giant Baba, yeah.
Okay, and then you had Pedro defeated Black Gordman.
Yeah, Gordman came in from the Olympic Auditorium. We watched them on New York TV. Gordman was a big star here,
Yeah, and then you had the WWF World Champion Bruno Sammartino and Chief Jay Strongbow defeated Freddie Blassie and Nikolai Volkov in a 2 out of 3 falls match, 2 falls to none. Sammartino and Strongbow won via DQ in fall number 1, and Sammartino pinned Blassie in fall number 2, and this was Blassie's last wrestling appearance at MSG.
Let me tell you a funny memory. As a kid, we had a black and white TV. That's how long ago that was. You're talking almost 50 years ago. So we had a black and white TV, and then suddenly you go into the Garden, and these guys are in color.
Yeah.
And it's like superheroes and supervillains. It's like Marvel comics come to life. And as a kid, you're just in awe of it. Yeah.
And people don't think about that. You're seeing these people that you watched on a small, B&W TV, all of a sudden larger than life in front of you in living color. and you can almost reach out and touch them. Evan, you remember the days, because I certainly can, when the seats were within striking distance of the ring. There were no barriers, no barricades. You had a ring announcer table right up against the ring, and the seats were right behind it.
Oh, yeah, and you always had the crazy old, like, Captain Mary type grandmothers who would, like, hit the wrestlers. Yeah, because people believed back then. They believed the heat was real. I saw Billy Graham and Mil Mascaras headline the Garden, and Mascaras lost on some kind of technicality, and the fans were ready to riot, and Mascaras was like motioning, calm down, you know. I mean, you know, today it's a cartoon for the most part, you know. Yeah. You're not gonna get that kind of heat. We used to get guys running into the ring to attack the wrestlers.
I remember. Evan, final thoughts before I let you go.
Sure.
No, do you have anything?
You want me to do the final thoughts?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
You're gonna hit me with a question. All right. I just want to, you know, thank everybody for their support of 350 days, and you know, you could, as Mikey said, you could watch it on Amazon Prime and Tubi, or you could order a hard copy at 350daysthemovie.com. And check out WrestlingThenAndNow.com. You can follow me on social media. I have Evan Ginzburg's Old School Wrestling Memories on Facebook, and I have a new page, Evan Ginzburg's 1960s, 1970s, 1980s Memories, which is a pop culture page with some wrestling, and I'm not hard to find. And yeah, I just want to say something about Mikey. I love this guy because he's like a younger version of me. He's not scared to speak his mind and take some heat. And you know, some of the fan is short for fanatic, and some of these people will actually verbalize WWE is my religion and Vince is my hero and blah blah blah. And you know, you can take some serious heat out there for speaking your mind. And,
and Mikey sure does.
Yes,
yeah, so, you know, I respect that because not everybody wants to be attacked.
So do we, and that's why he's here.
Yeah, and he's also a quality filmmaker. He's not a hack.
Oh, you know? No, an amazing
filmmaker. I've seen a lot of his work. Yeah. So, respect to Mikey. And you guys too, because, you know, it's nice to do a quality radio show instead of, you know, let's overanalyze every match on the 37th pay-per-view of the year. Numbing after a while, numbing.
Well, we consider that a great compliment, Evan. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll be in touch with you the next day or so, my friend. Take care.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Evan Ginzburg, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Never mind.
All right, everybody. Evan Ginzburg. That was a great interview.
That was fun. It was a lot of fun. I think Mike had something to say there at the end. What were you going to say, Mike?
Well, I just Mikey. The support from Evan about my wrestling rants, and it's true. You know, I'm in the murk because my thing, guys, and I think that's why you guys invited me to be on your show. I'm not afraid to challenge the wrestling fan out there to think a little bit. Mm-hmm. And whether it's to think about what WWE is doing, what AEW is doing, or to even think what we are doing as fans. You know, to quote someone from your neck of the woods, Bruce Springsteen, blind faith in your government or in anything will get you killed. And even in professional wrestling. So you have to be on your toes. You have to
question in professional wrestling.
Well, you know, I just came under a lot of Twitter heat yesterday myself because
I know.
You saw it, didn't you?
I did.
But I was not going to let it loose. It was about the whole Corey Graves thing, and I will address it really fast. His comments that he made, and they were directed at Mauro Ranallo, and what he said was, two other people up there. My whole argument was, constructive criticism, if anything, just saying, hey, which he can't. Mauro, I love him. I love him as a commentator, but he can be kind of over the top with his commentary and overshadow who's up there in the box with him.
Well, isn't that what sets him apart, Jeff?
Oh, yeah.
The fact that he is so over the top?
I no doubt about it. But, I mean, you got two other people that you got to try to work off of as well. I mean, that's your job as a commentator, not to overshadow them. I mean, Jerry Lawler and Jim Ross were one of the best duos because Lawler just sat back and let Jim Ross do the collar, and then he'd fight where he needed
and
to.
now there are people calling for Jerry the King Lawler to be gone.
That's because, he's old and outdated. But anyway, the whole Corey Graves thing, and then, somebody said,
there's no love for us old guys, is what I'm saying here.
I got you, but but the whole Corey Graves thing is, I think my whole point was, I think everybody who ran with it and said that he was trying to, bully Morrow, Corey Graves was trying to bully Morrow and whatever. I think they just wanted to take it just like they did even with the Cornette deal and run with it in a whole nother direction than what was even meant.
Mikey, do you think it's just because people need something to bitch about?
I think that's a great point. And when I first saw the story, it was on Kevin Castle from Kevin Castle and Don Tony's show. And,
I love their show. It's a great show.
Kevin's a cool dude. And
give them a little plug, the Don Tony and Kevin Castle show.
Yep. And when Kevin tweeted about it, my response was, isn't it a sad day in pro wrestling when legit heat or supposed legit heat between commentators is more intriguing and interesting and seemingly legitimate than storyline heat or wrestler heat?
Right. And what does that tell you about the product?
What does it tell you? And to be honest, guys, and it's not to be a sexist or anything, but it might sound that way. The women in the last 10 years have really raised their game, from Charlotte Flair, Sasha Banks, up and down, Asuka, Tessa Blanchard. We can name 30 or 40, Rhea Ripley now. But the men have become backseat passengers to this professional wrestling thing.
Yep.
And when I say the men, I mean the men wrestlers. Because if we're getting worked up about Mauro Ranallo, who's a sensitive guy, and I feel for his mental health issues, I personally don't like his commentary. I find him to be over the top, and he just sells things too hard for me. But I don't wish the guy any ill will in any regard. But when him and Corey Graves, who I don't like his tattoos on his neck, I find him disturbing to look at.
Yeah, I agree.
When they get into a beef with each other, and that's more intriguing than anything on Raw or NXT TakeOver.
Well, here's a question.
Sure.
Jeff, here's a question. Maybe you could take this, and I want both of you guys to answer it. But here's a question for you. Is Mauro Ranallo better served doing another brand within the WWE family?
I think he's fine doing the NXT brand where he's been. And I don't even think that Corey Graves was really attacking him as much as fans want to make it out to be. I think what it was, honestly, he gave his criticism, and then you had fans who don't like Mauro and don't like his style or whatever that started driving in on him and attacking him. And then that's when he pulled his account. It wasn't because of what Graves said. But everybody wants to point to Corey Graves because currently he is who the wrestling world hates.
Yeah.
So therefore, we got to point the finger at him and make him out to be the bad guy. I said this, and this is what I said in a tweet. I said, how come is it okay if two wrestlers who we read about by Meltzer or whoever are having a beef backstage, if they bring their beef to social media and start airing their dirty laundry, we're okay with that. We're all okay with that as fans. We're all over that. We're going to support whoever we want in that war. But the minute a guy with mental health problems, and again, not taking away from what Mauro has, but the minute he gets butthurt or his fans do, holy crap, we got to have a shitstorm against Corey Graves.
Yeah.
That was unnecessary. It really was. And everybody was like, well, that's because the men are different. Who's to say that those guys don't have mental health issues? You don't know that.
Well, that's a real good point. Mike, you want to chime in on that?
Well, I think Corey, let's face facts. I think a lot of people, and myself included, are jealous of Corey Graves because he's having sex with Carmella, who's one of the hottest women in the sport. And so you're not going to get much sympathy out of me for Corey Graves when he's got Carmella following him around.
Don't be shy, Mikey. Just tell us what's on your mind. All right, well, gentlemen, we're going to wrap this up. Mikey, any closing thoughts, plugs?
Well, I just want to say it's although this is the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving's coming up, and just I'll probably do a YouTube Mikey Messier video rant about it. But one of my early Thanksgiving memories was my dad took me to a Thanksgiving night pro wrestling show, the Capitol Center, the WWF, and they actually did something only 2 times, and I was there for one of them, the Thanksgiving night turkey tournament. It was a 20-man steel cage match. 20 guys are in the cage. You had Pat Patterson, who came out of semi-retirement. You had Bobby the Brain in there out of semi-retirement. You had Big John Studd, Tito Santana, Greg Valentine. Yeah. And the object was these 20 guys, and a lot of big names were in this thing. The first guy to escape from the cage would win, I think they said $20,000. And then the rest of the guys, after one guy escaped over the top, which turned out to be my favorite wrestler at the time, Rocky Soulman Johnson, The Rock's father.
Oh, yeah, sure.
He escaped, climbed over, and everybody was kind of surprised because Rocky was not the most over guy at that time. He was a former tag team champion. And then the rest of the guys had to fight. And they fought for about 45 minutes. And each guy had to escape really for no particular reason, because Rocky was already the winner and had the money.
What year was this?
This was 1984, Thanksgiving night 84 in Capitol Center, Landover, Maryland.
I was just going to look it up really quick.
You'll see the show. But the other match I think was Roddy Piper Tonga Kid was the other feature match.
It was.
Yeah, Sook and Orton.
That is a wild concept to do. I mean, well, that's kind of like the Bunkhouse Stampede from January of '88 with Crockett.
And Jeff, it's the only time they ever did it.
And get this.
I mean, there's a reason why you only do something one time a lot of times.
Now, the turkey tournament, the thing is, once Rocky Johnson won it, there was a second half to this thing. The other guys would fight to escape. And the guy who was the last guy in the ring, in the cage, after all other 18 guys escaped, would be called the Turkey of the Year. He wouldn't have to wear a turkey suit. He wouldn't get his head shaved. He wouldn't be thrown in butter or gravy. He would just be labeled the Turkey of the Year. This thing came down to Bobby the Brain Heenan, Big John Studd, Greg Valentine, Pat Patterson, and Tito Santana. Somehow they let Studd got out. Heenan and Valentine fought Patterson and Tito for about 7 or 8 minutes. Studd grabbed the microphone and said, "Bobby, get out of that cage. You don't want to be the turkey, Bobby." Eventually, the heels, Heenan and Valentine, got the advantage. Bobby got out. Then I think Patterson got out, leaving Tito and Valentine, who had this big Intercontinental title feud at the time.
Right,
fought for about 10 minutes. Santana at one point even tried to pin Valentine, forgetting he was in this turkey tournament thing, thinking he was in a regular title match. Eventually, lo and behold, Tito Santana escaped the cage. Greg Valentine was named your Turkey of the Year. And a friend of mine who came to the show with me and my dad, Brian Hazard, spat on Greg Valentine to end the
Well, that was on November the 22nd, 1984.
Yeah.
And you had Bob Orton Jr. defeated Salvador Bellomo in the opening contest.
Yep,
Salvatore Bellomo.
Tito
The late
Santana
Salvatore Bellomo.
Tito Santana defeated Mr. Fuji. Greg Valentine defeated Sweet Hansen in an IC title match. Good old, yay, Sweet Hansen, big Swede. Tony Atlas, Rocky Johnson defeated the Moondogs. Big John Studd had his hands full with S.D. Jones.
Yes, indeed.
Dr. D. David Schultz defeated the Brooklyn Brawler himself, Steve Lombardi.
Oh, yeah.
The Tonga Kid,
Piper
via DQ. And then Rocky Johnson won the 10,000-man, 20-man steel cage battle royal that had Bellomo, Moondog Spot, Bob Bradley, Mr. Fuji, Tony Gurria, Sweet Hansen, Bobby Heenan, Billy Jack, Rocky Johnson, S.T. Jones, Lombardi, McGraw, Angelo Mosca, Patera, Samu, Big John Studd, Dr. D, David Schultz, Tito Santana, and Greg Valentine. And then, as he said, Johnson won by being the first to escape, and then Valentine was the last man, and he was the Turkey of the Year.
All right. Now, Jeff, any final thoughts for the night? Some plugs, Vanguard?
Yeah, final thoughts on the night. Everybody, I will say this. Thanksgiving tradition for me was always Starrcade. I would encourage anybody, if you got the WWE Network or YouTube, whatever, go watch any of the Starrcades from 1983 through probably 88, and then after that, they all started to go to crap. But any of those are really good ones to watch and continue that tradition. But let's go here. Vanguard Championship Wrestling coming up December the 7th at the Norfolk Masonic Temple in Norfolk, Virginia, and it's a beautiful little arena there. And we will be having the one, the only, appearing Mick Foley. You can go to vcw-wrestling.com for more info, for more ticket info. Look them up on Facebook at Vanguard Championship Wrestling, and on Facebook. And of course, I'll be there, and and it's going to be a fantastic night.
Now,
and then,
Jeff, are you working the show that night?
I am. I'm working security that night. Yes, sir.
Terrific.
And,
also, in December, if you are in New Jersey on the East Coast, Glassboro, New Jersey is the place. The Max Fit Sports Center is the venue. It's Holiday Star Wars. NWA Dog. I'm sorry, it's not NWA anymore. It's Dog Championship Wrestling. Dog Championship Wrestling in Glassboro, New Jersey. Tatanka, Flying Brian Pillman Jr., J.J. Dillon, all on hand. Breaker Morant, the Old School Empire, Patch, and Big Vinny the Fixer.
I love that name. I still do.
You got to check these guys out. They are amazing. They're hilarious. Two guys in their 50s that are just off the chart.
Having fun.
And so over, it's ridiculous. And that's December the 28th, bell times at 7 p.m. Get there early for the meet and greet. You will see JJ, Flying Brian Jr., Tatanka. You'll have a picture taken with them, get an autograph, chat with them a little bit, and stay for about 3 hours worth of wrestling action. I'm going to shout out to Jaden, promoter of the show. You can catch us here, Wrestling with the Future, at Twitter, and we are at Wrestling Future on Twitter, Facebook.com/Wrestling with the Future. And you can catch us on Podbean, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, iTunes, Google Play Music, YouTube, Twitch.tv, and by carrier pigeon and the fillings in your teeth. Mikey, any plugs?
December 8th, 2 o'clock, Avalonia Film Festival tonight. By the time people hear this, it might be too late to enter for this year, but you can enter next year. It's a distancefromavalon.com or Avalonia Festival on Film Freeway, MikeMessier.com for all your Mike Messier needs, wants, and desires. I'll actually have a film in Memphis, Tennessee on December 7th for Suds and Cinema. That's my Thanksgiving short film, which I'll probably put on Facebook as well for everybody. And
be sure to check out Mike Messier's feature documentary, One of the Boys, the Ox Baker story, and that is exclusively, and I can't believe I'm doing this, on the Vince Russo brand on the Realm Network, and Jeff is shaking his head. Can't believe I'm putting over Vince Russo.
Well, it's for Ox.
But I'm doing that because Mikey is the newest member of our broadcast family, and we love Mikey. Right. And if it means having to put up with Vince Russo, then God bless us for doing so.
Real quick, I gotta ask Mike something, and then we can totally say goodnight and all that. Mike, is Ox Baker always in character?
90% of the time he was.
Okay.
He did have some downtime, but about 90% of the time he was.
And you'll see his downtime in this film. Mikey did an amazing job, Jeff. Mikey did a great job of capturing the real Ox Baker.
I've watched it, but that's what I was going to say was it was almost like he had to catch him at the right moment.
Yeah.
Out of character.
And I think that the fact that here's the thing about this. this was Ox's idea.
Yeah,
It was his goodbye note.
it was.
To the wrestling fans, and it was touching and moving. And if you watched this film and did not cry at the end of it,
Oh, no doubt.
that you didn't, you just don't have a heart. Yeah.
He was
But
a great
it's one
guy.
of the boys, the Ox Baker story on Vince Russo's The Brand on the Realm Network.
Yeah, it's on Vince's YouTube channel. It's also on my YouTube channel. It's on my Vimeo channel. So all you have to do is just do a search, Ox Baker, one of the boys, Mikey Messier. However you watch it, it's for free. There was no money exchange for that movie to be made. That was Ox's gift to the fans. And I'm glad Ox's words could be shared. And it's been over 5 years since we lost Ox. I can't believe how time has flown. I spoke at his funeral. I read that at his funeral. So
Yeah, and it's been, I think, 2 years now since Ivan's gone, right, Jeff?
Yeah, it was 2 years this February that we lost him. So
Yeah. Well, we as we celebrate Thanksgiving,
yes, sir.
let us all be thankful of the great stars that we've had the pleasure and privilege of knowing.
And watching.
And well, for myself, it was Bruno. I got to know Bruno a little bit. I got to know King Kong Bundy, Chris Pally, who was very close by. I knew Jimmy Snuka, all gone. Larry Sharp was a very dear friend, gone. But as we celebrate Thanksgiving, we're just grateful and thankful that we got to know these people while they were still here. And we will, thank goodness, through film and videotape, they live.
Yes, sir.
So please check out YouTube or any of your video streaming services to watch some of our stars from days gone by. And thank you, Evan Ginzburg,
Yes.
for documenting them on film to live forever.
Yep.
So on behalf of Mikey Messier and Jeff the Ref Robinson, I'm Psychic Angelo. Good night, happy wrestling, and goodbye, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.